This is a CBC podcast. Want a weekly roundup of the best CBC radio programming? Subscribe to the CBC Radio 1 newsletter. Get a digest of the week's top stories, read in-depth articles, listen to interviews and documentaries, and get the lowdown on upcoming stories from CBC Radio 1 that you need to hear. To subscribe, go to cbc.ca/radio and look for the subscribe button. The CBC Radio 1 newsletter. Be informed.
Anine Jain, how are you?
Gonalonkwa, which is I love you.
Agamemok. Keep going.
Diane today for Don't Touch.
This is First Words, an Indigenous language podcast by Unreserved.
Yat-e, which is a greeting.
Miigwech, which means thank you.
My full name is Valentina Fox. I'm a Nakoda from the Morley community. We are going to speak Nakoda, Yiskain Abi. It was the only language I knew from the time I could talk, because it's the only language people spoke in the home. And so I didn't know any English until I went to school. But because it was the language I grew up speaking, even though it wasn't allowed in the school, we still maintained it, because we went home on weekends and holidays and summer holidays, and it was the only language we spoke in the home. Because we were taught that our spirituality was evil and a product of the devil, I avoided. I avoided both church and ceremonies for a long time after I left the residential school. I just totally stayed away from it. You know, I left the reserve when I was young and started working off reserve for about 10 years. But whenever I returned, Nakoda was the language I spoke. I never lost it, because once it's embedded into you, you remember it. I worked off reserve. I trained as a certified nursing aide and worked in hospitals, and English was the only language that I could speak in the work area. If I started speaking my language, nobody would understand. So I spoke English. When I came back to the reserve, I felt more at home, I guess. I always felt out of place when I was out there. But when I came back, even family members considered me different, because I've been exposed to another life, you know. Even family members were starting to accuse me of thinking I was white or I'm acting white. But that's what the school conditioned us to do in the first place. It hurt, you know, because I thought I was the same person. And then I'd get mad, well, especially with my family, I'd get mad at them for telling me I was different. Mm-hmm. You know, I still speak the language. And then there was, when I came back and started working at the local health center, I used to do home visits to elders. There was one particular elder who, when I entered the house, his wife, they were having lunch, and they were having dried meat. And, of course, I love dried meat. Of course, she set out a plate for me, too. And I started eating, and the old man said, "Oh," in our language. He said, "Oh, washidrins watusai yudagabi heni." He was saying, "Oh, so white people eat dried meat," you know, in our language. And his wife told him, "You be quiet. She is our niece. She is our own person." And he started laughing because that indicated that in his mind I was still acting white or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the way I felt. I didn't fit out there and I didn't fit in there. So I started to fit myself back into the community. I grew my hair long braids, and of course I was always speaking our language. So and then of course I got married and started raising a family here. But you know, I had to fit back into it. I attended ceremonies and stuff like that. So people started to see, oh, she's the same old Taina. Out of a total of about 5,400 people there's at least 2,000 fluent speakers left. And so that's a signal for us to fight to retain our language, to reinforce our language. Nakoda language is taught here from K to 12. So it's being taught, but it's not producing speakers. That's my concern. And I've heard this from other tribes too. They're saying that it's being taught, but it's not producing speakers. I'm encouraging young parents to start learning the language and to speak it, and to let Nakoda be the first language their child speaks. Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I'm pushing for that whenever I get a chance to talk to young parents, yeah. I was talking to Dwayne Mark, who teaches the language and culture at the high school, and he's saying that a lot of these young people have no interest in learning the language or even learning the traditional teachings. They think they're cool because they speak English only. That, to me, is the victory of the federal government, whose sole purpose when they set up residential school was to kill the Indian and the Indian child by taking them away from the parents and then placing them in residential schools and teaching them to be English-speaking, brown-skinned white kids. If we keep up the work that we're doing, teaching it here, but also perhaps going having immersions, or I think for me, the way I see it is that we teach the young parents the language in the community so that they can learn and use the language with their children. I think that's how we will produce speakers. But we have to teach these non-speaking Stoney parents the language before, so they can teach it to their kids. Yeah, I think that's the answer in my mind. Valentina Fox Shemangabich, Nakoda Uyan Hebmanchach. Yes, kain abinde, no ham, no ninja mechigabich, ishnish. Hang on to our language, our Nakoda language.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.